warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for joining us on this special program brought to you by Shelter Zimbabwe and Etosha Gardens. We're currently joined by the Managing Director, Mr. Chester Mhende. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, exciting news for Shelter Zimbabwe and Etosha Gardens. Maybe you could give us a brief background on the two organizations before we get to the big announcement.
Well, the story basically is that shelter represents housing. And housing is a big topic. A person in a flat is in a house. A person in a mansion is in a house. A person in a tent camping is in a house of some kind. A person in a grave is in some kind of housing. So originally we came with shelter. We thought shelter was more appealing than housing. So we called ourselves Shelter Zimbabwe. So those are the origins. How do we house the people?
Right. And in being able to house the people, one can't also help but appreciate some of the steps and measures that you have managed to achieve to get to as far as you have. Maybe you could also give us the conception of the idea around being able to not only appreciate Shelter Zimbabwe and Etosha Gardens, but them coming together.
Right. Well, we've always had this challenge at the back of our minds. What are we doing about shelter? What are we doing about housing? Have we completed the task by just giving them shelter for the living? And as nature would have it, I had a friend, he was working for Total Oil at the time when his family was moving. He approached me almost last minute and he said, look, I've got a piece of land in Rua, would you have it? And the natural reaction was, yeah, why not? But I knew very little about what he'd given me, and at the time it was perfect, because my mother was in the village and I wanted to upgrade her, and we brought my mother there, and she got on with her life. My mother was a hands-on girl who was into agriculture, so she messed around, and as you can imagine, land for my mother to exhaust her appetite wasn't much. So we didn't really see what she was sitting on until we were forced to move her out of there because of urbanization, which was approaching our land. We moved her into town, and then this piece of land was looking at us. What do you do with me? In discussion, why don't we go and do more housing? Initially, the thought was, why don't we go and do agro-based plots where people can retire? Because, we had this thing about the progression of the human being. So, we were going to do that. So the idea was cut it into 72 plots.
Right.
Until we discovered, when we sent a water engineer, that we will not be able to give all 72 people water. So we said, what do we do next? And the next thing was, who can we accommodate that doesn't need water? And we then realized that, well, we have residents that don't need water, and this would be ideal for a cemetery, and those are the origins.
Right. Now, such an origin also can't ignore the innovative nature of being able to consider housing people who are alive and housing people who are deceased, meaning that there's housing throughout life and death. Bringing these two ideas together in the merger of Shelter Zimbabwe and Etosha Gardens must speak volumes to how you want to position yourself within the market now. Maybe you could share with us a bit about that.
Well, right now we are before the authorities with various papers to be considered. Some of the stages we have passed. We are now left with maybe the last stage to go through. Our dream, if permitted, is to be your one-stop station for shelter, your one-stop station for housing, where, one in their youth buys a house with us, buys a flat with us, goes into a cluster unit with us, and at the same time get themselves into a pay plan. for their ultimate destination, albeit for their parents to start with and for themselves. But we're saying, there's an issue called legacy. I look at Gwaze and I say, right, who are you? And you say, you're born of, Oliver. And who is Oliver? He's born of John.
Right.
Where is John? And you may find that John is buried in Mutoko, and none of you have ever been there.
Right.
And you can't quite identify and relate to John. So why don't we begin a culture where your dad is buried next to you, and your son is buried and daughter next to you, and your whole family has got a place where we can tell a story many years down the line. Yes. There are many people today who do not know their grandfather, let alone their great-grandfather. So if we can begin to tell the story today about you, you'll be a father tomorrow, you'll be a grandfather, you'll be a great-grandfather, and so it goes on. So we don't lose our identity. I attended a lecture the other day that was talking about fatherhood. And I was very disturbed because this lecture identified God as the ultimate and the guide to who we are. And what disturbed me was that it obliterates father, grandfather, great-grandfather, and all that. I'm not saying there is anything wrong with identifying with God, but I'm saying, can we have just as an important a discussion about our relation to God as we do our relation to our parents? If you go into Germany and Italy and Japan and China, you will find that identity is very, very important. How many times do you run into Chinese people and hear them speaking English? Zilch. How many times do you run into Japanese, Italians speaking in, or you go to Zimbabwe and you say, let's go to Sam Levy. You tell me the first and last time you ever ran into white people speaking in Shona. Right. And half of them will say, what are you talking about? And they are in this country and they claim to be Zimbabweans like me and you. Right. So identity is critical.
Yeah, very critical. Talking about identity, I can't help but also acknowledge the government's position to be able to ensure that 1 million housing units rather, are made available to the populace. That particular target can't be met without support from the private sector, entities such as yourselves. If you could maybe share with us how you look to being able to contribute towards meeting that particular target.
Well, we've been on the road for 40 years. In our 40 years, we've contributed 14,000 units, which is insignificant. It's insignificant because this country has 225,000 students or children coming out of school every year. 225,000 right across, from O-level, even if you say from grade 7, because most farming children are not going very far in education. So you look at grade 7 as the exit point, you look at O-level as the exit point, A-level as another point, and a degree another point. 220, 230, 250,000 every year are coming onto the job market. These people want housing. Somebody has got to do something about it, and I ran into ministry officials the other day. They're doing a policy document or refining their policy document on settlements, and I was delighted to hear that they are talking about housing the living and housing the dead, which was very encouraging, because you come into my village, every little family has got their own graveyard. So where are we going with this? Surely this must be organized. Right. Every family, every village must have a cemetery.
Well, you seem to also have segued very well to my next follow-up on that, in that regard, with burial plots. Concern having been raised within the city of Harare that burial spaces have basically come to an end. I think only 2 areas have been earmarked so far. Maybe you could tell us a bit about how Etosha Gardens seems to also want to be able to contribute towards meeting the dire need, excuse the pun, of burial spaces for the people of Harare.
Well, Etosha has challenged the culture, behavior, and all our graves are what we call bunker graves, or some would call them double burials. Essentially, they are designed to accommodate husband and wife. But we're saying, why can't they be four? Why can't they accommodate four people? Why can't they accommodate even more? But this discussion goes further. We are, in one of our phases, planning to build a mausoleum. We've already started building crypts. Now, crypts is where you bury ashes. And mausoleum is also somewhere where you can bury ashes, but in a lot of cases, the whole body is buried in mausoleums for the very, very, very rich. But we are saying, hasn't the time come for discussion on cremation?
Brilliant point there that you do raise, and I look forward to extending that discussion. Well, that brings us to the end of our discussion, appreciating the sentiments that have been shared by the managing director of what is now going to be called a Shelter Incorporated. Thank you so much for joining us.
A very small percent of smart people can predict what the future holds and invest wisely. Investments that guarantee a secure future and generational wealth. Real estate is one investment that can never go wrong, especially when dealing with a tried and tested company. As Shelter Zimbabwe, having been in the property development business for over 3 decades, we derive satisfaction in giving our valued clients smart housing solutions, providing modern and sustainable built-up residential spaces of unsurpassed quality. Be a smart investor. Discover and experience the joy of owning a home. Yes, where others see just land, we see not only homes, but a lifestyle so desirable and worth living. A redefinition of urban living in a modern, urban, and serene environment. Witness the beauty of a worthwhile and secure investment by a team which brings it all together and dedicated to achieving extraordinary results. With us, you can get a service stand where you can build your dream home to suit your unique taste and style, as we offer an assortment of high, medium, and low density housing options. We are there to create endless possibilities. Our ultimate desire being to build homes specifically designed with you in mind, to give you the luxury and comfort you deserve. With 1-bedroom apartments for young professionals, 2-bedroom apartments for growing families, and spacious 3-bedroom apartments with ample space for maximum expression. At Shelter Zimbabwe, your dream home is just a step away.
Welcome back into the second segment of this special program brought to you by Shelter Zimbabwe and Etosha Gardens. Currently joined by the managing director, Mr. Chester Mhende. Interesting discussion we had in the previous segment. Maybe you could shed a bit more light into what necessitated towards the merger of Shelter Gardens, Shelter Zimbabwe rather, and Etosha Gardens.
Okay. It's actually 3 brands. It's Shelter Zimbabwe, Etosha Memorial Park, and Etosha Gardens. There has been a lot of buzz about Etosha Gardens because that is what is happening right now. But Etosha Gardens was our entry point. We will now graduate into Etosha Memorial, which becomes the next brand, which is a different product to the Etosha Gardens product. So we intend to have these 3 run next to each other. as we move into the next phase. Etosha Memorial is where you will see more and more of the newer ways of dealing with death, if newer is the correct word to use. Newer in the sense that we believe society in our country has got to take seriously the discussion on cremation. We've got to take seriously into other ways of dealing with the afterlife. We will all be reminded of the way they dealt with the remains of the late Bishop Desmond Tutu. He was put through eco-cremation, which means they dissolved his body, and his body became a liquid, and the liquid was dealt with whatever way the family wanted to, which was very creative. Then there is cremation as we know it, where the body is put through heat and the body is burnt, and you get ashes. There is other ways that are coming where the body is deposited in a casket, where the body is surrounded in soda ash, wood ash, amongst other things, for a period. I think the average so far is 9 months. At the end of 9 months, you and I are reduced to manure, and the manure is sold. So that is what is going to be the next phase, and what Etosha Memorial is going to deal with. And as in the word, it's simply going to emphasize on the memory as in the memorabilia as it is presented in a different way to the way that we have the conventional burial in Etosha Gardens. What brings this about? Well, like I alluded to earlier, we are in the shelter space. We are in the accommodation space. We are in the housing space. And we are saying, how can we house people? In exactly the same way that we are talking about developments in the afterlife, there are developments also in the living, because we can no longer continue to talk about Harare meeting Rua, Rua meeting Melfort, Melfort meeting Marondera. If we do that, how are we going to eat? Right. So somebody has got to put a stop to this urban sprawl and emphasize very strongly on going up. I know ministry has got the 40% provision for flats, but is 40% enough? If you go into Mbare and where you see the population explosion, shouldn't the numbers be the other way around? Shouldn't you be looking at 60-70% in flats and the difference in the luxury of single-story buildings on to one family, and ultimately the preserve of the rich? That day is going to come. So these are the developments that bring us together to emphasize and refine the shelter business.
Briefly, you did touch on a few of the opportunities that come as a result of this merger taking place. Maybe you could share with the public what the benefits, rather, would be in being able to take advantage of the service offering with Shelter Incorporated.
Well, the benefits are that you are sharpening and you're focusing your whole life arrangement. You will be aware that our punchline on in Etosha and is preparedness. Rufurwa Garongeka. So we are simply saying, can your life be organized, please? You have a house, and where do you go to ultimately? Whether we like it or not, unfortunately, we are all going to end up there. It doesn't matter who we are. And so we are saying, can it be organized? And we're also saying, can you have one rub into the other? Can you imagine you have a relationship with Shelter where you bought a stand, you bought a house, you bought a flat, you bought a penthouse, and whatever else you're doing in that area, and then move into a grave or cremation and whatever. It just becomes like preparation for that journey. In exactly perhaps the same way as you would want to prepare your life into going to grade 7, from grade 7 to Form 1, Form 2, Form 4, and prepare to get to university, from university, prepare to take a job, from a job to prepare to run your own business. Life just needs to be organized.
And how would you then say that life being organized expectation can be derived from prospective clients who look to being able to take advantage of offerings from Shelter Incorporated?
Well, clients take advantage of it because of relationships. You walk into our place today, we don't know you. Next week, we know you from last week. Next month, we know you from last month. And in a year's time, we know you from your house that you bought from us. In 5 years' time, we know you from the house you bought from us when you bought the flat, when you bought the penthouse. We know you, and you can silently now, for $5 a month, be doing a pay plan for your afterlife. So it's all about relationships and exploiting those relationships with us giving you solutions that deal with your tomorrow.
So talk about tomorrow. Where to from here? What is, in essence, the way forward, having initiated this merger?
Well, we have done what we can on the ground, which now awaits the rubber stamp or the approval of the authorities. We have created 5 divisions in the company. So the one division is dealing with the Etosha product. The second division is dealing with operations, which is where we are doing roads and which is infrastructure and superstructure, where we are doing sewer treatment plants. The next division is the sales and marketing. The next division is finance and accounting. The fifth division is human resources, administration, and legal. So we've collapsed ourselves into that approach, all focused on these 3 brands and managing these 3 brands. Obviously, they will then have their own rollout in terms of implementation, as is distinct in Etosha, with the head that is focusing on his 2 brands, and the operations in Shelter focusing on his infrastructure and superstructure. We now employ a Class 1 builder, in readiness for building high-rise flats. So we have got a civil engineer who runs our infrastructure and superstructure division, a quantity surveyor for preparedness. So that's where we are, and that is within our means and our power, approved by our board, with the final stamp expected as soon as our strategic plan and our scorecards are presented to the board and sanctioned. We then are hoping that inside the next month, we will get approval from government for the merger to go ahead. From a structural and legal point of view, it should be a given, because you are simply saying, my name is John and my family name is Mhende, can I be one person? That's really what we are saying. Because Etosha and Shelter are owned by the same ownership at the end of the day. So we are simply saying, can we be allowed to house them all together? When that is done, we will be on the road and running.
That's it. Looking forward to the successful journey that Shelter Incorporated will be taking. And I also am aware that there will be a handover process that will be taking place to the ministry with regards to developments that have taken place. Maybe very briefly, you could share with us a bit on that.
Okay. We at our level hand over to the local authority. And it is up to the local authority to involve government. like a child does not go to grandfather, you go to your mom and dad, and mom and dad decide, when and where to bring the rest of the family. So, and we do this at the turn of every project. In our business, this is what is called compliance. So every project, when we finish it, on completion, we are required to go and obtain what is called a certificate of compliance, which means we've done everything: roads, water, sewer, and people can do. Yeah. So we are, we're doing it at the end of every project. Shortly we are handing over a bridge. Then we will hand over a single-story construction project, and so we move on. But it's always exciting, when we're doing these handover processes, because, all the excitement that you find in people owning a home, some owning a home for the first time, and it's a very interesting step in any economy.
No, that's it. Mr. Mhende, thank you so much for your time, and we definitely do look forward to speaking to you again in future.
Thank you for having me, and I am expecting that my colleagues will now come to the show, the different heads that I've spoken about, so that they can explain to you what they will also be doing as their own individual contribution on this journey.
That's it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Well, that brings us to the end of our discussion. Thank you so much for staying tuned with us on this special program brought to you by Shelter Zimbabwe, Etosha Gardens, and Etosha Memorial Park, which will officially now become Shelter Incorporated. That's it for now. Pleasant viewing.